Oh well, we'll start now. So this particular article about the purposes of higher education, and Kallenberg makes this remark, that Flagler has attracted social economic diversity because of the way it charges. It says tuition fees are about half what an average private college. It means it's about 28,000, 30,000, as opposed to about 50,000. I think that's why it's currently running. I'd have to look again. It says he looked at certain aspects. He outlined 5 purposes of the goals of higher education. Why higher education should be pursued. What are the reasons a person should go on to pursue higher education? What are the goals? It says he outlined each of these. That the goal of higher education, and hence why people go to college, that every student, no matter the wealth of parents, has a chance to enjoy the American dream. That sort of ties into this an article that our pre-textbook called They Say I Said. The last part of that book focused on the American dream, so this where this article sort of stems from my use of it. The idea about the American dream, that every student will have the chance to enjoy the American dream, and he goes on to explain how pursuing a higher education ensures this or helps that. I'm going to go with ensure since that's his word. It says American higher education, you go to college, join a unionized occupation. Today, less than 7% of private sector workers are unionized, compared to 35% in the 50s. The most reliable avenue to economic security involves getting a 4-year degree. Remember earlier Murray's point about people going to school? It says they go to learn how to get a satisfying job that pays well. That's his comment. On page 528 in the book. Well, Kallenberg says, this going to get a college degree is the most reliable avenue to secure your economic future. But higher education says it's not doing a very good job of promoting social mobility. 82% of those from higher income families get a bachelor's degree by age 24, compared with just 8% from low income families. So if you come from the well-to-do families, we asked about that earlier. How many of you said you come from a family with plenty of money? Most of you didn't raise your hand, right? People from well-to-do families are more likely to get their bachelor's degree as opposed to people from lower income families. Well, this is one of the goals of higher education is to ensure that students have their share of the American dream, can have a secure economic future. Then higher education doesn't seem to be meeting that goal too well. It says a society in which children from wealthy families are about 10 times as likely to get college degrees as those from poor families is one marked by profound inequality. It says that higher education should educate leaders in our democracy. That's why Thomas Jefferson founded the University of Virginia. We all know that, right? He was the one who founded the University of Virginia. Just a few miles from his home, in fact. Go down this hill. Mount Hilliard's up there. You go down this, they call it a mountain, it's more like a hill. You go down this hill and turn to your right and go back into Charlottesville and there's school. Says that he wanted the United States to be led by a natural aristocracy of virtue and talent rather than an artificial aristocracy based on wealth and birth. System of free public education was critical to producing American leaders. That was his view. We need to provide free education. It says many institutions of higher education, though, fail to live up to this ideal, admitting some students through so-called legal preferences. Michael Lind, in a book called Affirmative Action for the Rich, stated, by reserving places on campus for members of the pseudo-aristocracy of wealth and birth, legacy preferences introduce an aristocratic snake into the Democrat-Republican garden of Eden. His point in that particular one, that we calls these pseudo-aristocracy, wealth, birth, reserving place on campus, he was talking about fraternities. I won't tell you that now. That's why I was looking at fraternities and sororities, the Greek system. Nothing necessarily wrong with the Greek system, fraternities and sororities. I was a member of a fraternity when I was an undergraduate. We helped actually start the local chapter at the University of Texas. we were not from well-to-do families, and we didn't have all this tradition, all this other aspect of it. But we're an interesting group of guys, I thought. But college sometimes can create this elite aspect. Certain people are viewed in certain ways. Reserving place on campus for members of a pseudo-aristocracy of wealth and birth. There's also other aspects that the elite attitude comes into play. Preferences are given to certain students because of certain backgrounds, etc., in a number of ways. When they talk about these legal or legacy preferences, these things can happen. Well, Jefferson wanted to have a natural aristocracy based on virtue and talent. Well, does that always happen? Well, this is supposed to be the goal. And Callenberg's view is this should be the goal. This is what higher education should be about. It's why people should be wanting to go to college. But it doesn't always seem to work that way. It says that colleges also should advance learning and knowledge through faculty research and should give students the opportunity to broaden their minds, even when learning does not seem immediately relevant to their careers. We talked about that last week. We talked about what kind of classes do you take and why are you having to take them. Callenberg's point is that students should be given the opportunity to broaden their minds, even when the learning is not immediately relevant. I just read to you about the CPA exam. One of their requirements they want their candidates to display: communication, well able to produce communication, critical thinking skills. Well, folks, we give a number of courses that are designed to help you develop critical thinking skills, designed to help you with communication skills. They're not necessarily accounting classes. Here's what Callenberg goes on to report about this. In the New Yorker magazine, he quotes Louis Menand. Says things about the world and yourself, if you do not learn them in college, you're unlikely to learn them anywhere else. If you're not exposed to ideas and issues, you may never run across them any other place. So you get caught up in family, career. So this idea about what you have an opportunity to learn will not be easily accomplished. Says that instead, in college, time should be spent becoming a reflective, culturally literate human being. Well, many people just tell me what I need to do to get my passing grade. So, Callenberg says the purpose of college, purpose of higher education, should be the development of an individual who is a reflective and culturally literate human being. But he says it falls short. In college, students such as vocational schools. What is it that Murray says? Why do people want to go to college? Again, how to get a satisfying job that pays well. I ask you folks why you're coming to school. Many of you said that so you can be prepared to get a job when you get through. How many of you are pursuing your education because you want to be a reflective and culturally literate human being? Okay, nobody raised a hand. Really? Says that one purpose of college, of higher education, should be to teach students to interact with people different, and he's wrong here. You don't say different than, it's different from. I have to mark him on this one. You know he's president of the college. I get to mark it. It's different from. It's never different than, it's always different from. Keep that in mind, because I will mark it. Public schools are more segregated today than any time in the last 3 decades. He says that American colleges, because they draw students from a variety of neighborhoods and states and countries, provide a unique environment in which students of different backgrounds can learn from one another. Do we have anyone in this class who is from a different country? I think this is one of the few semesters that I've taught 1301 that's the case. I usually have at least one student who is one of our foreign students. I taught people from various countries in Africa, some from Canada. We've had a number of Canadians on the girls' basketball team. Taught a couple of them. I've had students from Central Europe. Had one from Turkmenistan. I was like, how'd you get here? I had one last year from Hong Kong. And student in the class, how did you ever wind up at TVCC? I say, well, no, how did you get here to this place? And I said, well, but I usually have somebody from someplace. But this is the first time ruling 1301, I don't have. I didn't think I had anybody from a foreign country this time, but okay. Says that many colleges have done a fairly good job promoting racial diversity. Most do a poor job bringing students from different economic backgrounds together. Says many colleges now, and this is a quote from Walter Ben Michaels, which I don't necessarily agree with, have rich kids of all colors. Well, that's why I asked you earlier, how many of you would say that you come from families, as Murray calls it, families with plenty of money, and you didn't raise your hand? One of the situations about Trinity Valley, we do not necessarily draw the affluent family members. Now, some do, some are. For the most part, we don't. We have some ranging aspects. But this is a comment that an observer of colleges makes. That colleges now have rich kids of all colors. And then he raises this point. This is what I was trying to get to earlier. That one of the verses that Calendar says should be a goal of higher education is to help students find a passion, even a purpose in life. Now, we're going to assume that you folks, in trying to choose your majors, you have done so because you're passionate about that field. As I noted earlier, none of you seem to be passionate about physics. So sad. It's such a wonderful field. I did not major in it though, but I majored in English primarily because when I went to UT, I was planning on going to law school, and I thought that was a likely major for a law student to have, because you have to write and read, and I like reading, so okay, I majored in English. But how many of you, as you think about what you're majoring in, again, that can change. We talked about that last week when I said, general indications 6 to 7 times most people change majors. It's real easy to do. You go in undeclared, and you say business, and you move to finance, and you say, no, I think I'm going to go to accounting, then go, no, I think I'm going to go back to finance, so I'm finally going to go into marketing. Well, you just changed 5 times right there. Many of you are just now trying to figure out what you might want to major in. It's not something that is set for you, because some of you, you're still in high school. You're not even out of high school yet. You're coming into college. You're taking college classes. So you have some time really before you have to lock yourself in. And even after that, as I just commented, you may not even really be locked in then. One of the aspects about coming to a community college, we give you a core curriculum, basically, so that regardless of what you wind up changing your major to or going into a 4-year university major, most of the classes will transfer, and hopefully all of them will. But it becomes challenging. How do you tell somebody this is what you need to major in? I believe I told you this story about a student when I was teaching in a high school. For a number of years I taught the whole honors sequence of classes. I'd have freshman honors in English, I'd have sophomore honors in English, and then we'd go into the dual credit classes. Juniors would take the 1301, 1302, seniors would take the literature to fulfill their English 4 requirements. And in teaching one particular group of freshman honors students, I had them do some research about careers or other concepts. They had a chance to look into a number of different areas. And one of the students asked me, because I called her older brother to the family, and she said, well, what should I major in when I go to college? And I said, business. Next year when she was a sophomore, she goes, okay, you told me to major in business. Is there a particular thing? I said, finance. You need to major in finance. So she went to A&M, when she graduated high school, she majored in finance. Graduated with honors, and was offered a job, and is currently living in Australia, where she was sent for her job, and she's making 6 figures. Okay? Immediately after getting out of college, she was offered a job where she was making almost six figures. That was her introductory salary. I told her to major in finance. Hey, worked. I can't do that for everybody, but I knew her well enough. I could figure out what her interests were, what I figured she would do well with, what she would, what she enjoyed, and worked out. And it helps sometimes if you know them that way. But trying to find out what you care about is very challenging. I went to college. I was going to go to law school. That was my focus. I was going to go to law school. I decided to major in English because, again, I said I want to read and write when I go to law school. That's what you have to do. So I had an English major. UT did not have a pre-law major. If they had a pre-law major, I probably would have gone that way. And I probably would never have changed my major. I would have gone on to law school. Still majored in English. So when I started my second year at UT, I had already gone into taking my what they call upper division, what you guys might call junior, senior level courses in English, the ones that are actually the major courses. I was taking those. And I took a class in 18th century British literature. I'm not passionate about British literature, really. That's not, American literature is my specialty. But I enjoyed that class so much. What we did in that class, and I was working at the law school at the time as an undergraduate in the law library to learn more about the law. And I was going, the stuff I see the law students doing are not nearly as interesting as what I'm covering in my English class. I'd rather cover that more. And that's when I decided, I don't think I'm going to go to law school. I think I'm going to go to grad school, get my degrees, and teach college. Because I decided that's what I like to do. And so that's what I wound up doing. I made that decision at the age of 19. Now, not everybody can make that decision as early as that. It may take you a couple more years. Some people may decide early. They're passionate about what they have seen, and that's what they want to be, and they'll do that. But Callenberg's comment is that he wrote a thesis about Robert Kennedy's '68 campaign for president. He said Kennedy thought that the economic divide in this country was even greater than the racial and ethnic divides, and that hypothesis, bolstered by evidence, and I will get on to him for saying lots of evidence, because, again, slang, is something I pursued in almost all my research and writing since college. That's what he's been interested in. His passion was about the economic divide. It's hard to know how well higher education is doing in helping students find a passion, helping them think through what they're really good at, what they're truly interested in, what they believe are the most critical problems facing the country. So he hopes that officials in higher education think deeply about how best to spark in students a passionate interest that will help them lead truly meaningful lives. How many of you, as you think about what you are pursuing in your education, you feel a sense of passion about it? Yeah, that's my mind. Good. Only hand that was raised. I know some of you are still trying to figure out what that passion is going to be. You're, okay, they tell me I have to take this class, so I'm taking it. That's why we discussed that, I think, last week, why most people are taking the classes that they take. They're told to take the classes. And we looked at the Texas high school curriculum. So here they are. The courses are laid out. And then we said, oh, you actually have some options built within that one, but many schools don't offer those options. You have to take this other one. And here, take this because this is all we can offer. How do you find what you're passionate about? How do you determine if this is where an interest really inside of you will lead you? Well, that's very challenging, folks. And yet, Callenberg says that's the goal of higher education. Should be one of the goals. Allow you to explore and discover for yourself what you want to know. And that's very difficult because many people, all they want to know is, will this get me a job? As Murray says, will this give me a job that will pay well? Well, I've probably commented that I have friends who are truck drivers. They do not have college education. They make good money. You do not have to have a college education to find a job that will pay well. But do you enjoy doing that? Maybe not. Some people will, some people won't. it's a challenging aspect. Kallenberg brings that up. This is another one. Let me get back to it. Hold on, give me a moment. I had another one called up, but it disappeared on me. This is from San Joaquin Delta College, their student essays. So this is a student perspective on the purpose of college and higher education. You just had an educator's view. Kallenberg is at a college where he's a professor, or actually I think he's president of the college at the time. This is one from a student's perspective. What he sees as the true purpose of college and higher education. And that does not necessarily make it any better or any worse. But he starts off with, when academics created various educational systems long ago in ancient Greece and China, they did not design these centers of learning for the masses. When you go back to Plato's Academy and Aristotle taking over that, not everybody went to school, in case you're wondering. Only certain individuals, males, from privileged families, attended. Just letting you know. It says, therefore, the elite, the well-endowed, prosperous citizen, place were conceived with the ideas of wisdom and enlightenment in mind. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the student writes, this is no longer the case in many educational facilities. In the United States, university and college systems have become much more accessible to the populace. Though there is little doubt that this is a good turn of events, it has also brought about a change in the focus of many institutions. Universities seek to attract accomplished researchers from around the world. That's what universities do. Unlike community colleges is not, systems are not based upon research per se. University systems, most of the faculty are expected to pursue research, write articles, and pursue fields in their particular field. They're to pursue interest in those fields and write about that and conduct research along those lines. They're not there so much to teach as they are for bringing research. It says that they are putting less and less emphasis on dynamic curriculum and credentialed teachers. Instead of making education a diverse and interactive environment where one challenges known assumptions and probes mysterious realms of thought, it has become one where the same topics are taught repetitively every year, making students cynical and unconcerned about real learning. Now, this becomes a question later in this article. What qualifies something as real learning? What does he mean by real learning as opposed to, is there something called unreal learning? But we'll get to that later. Rather, students care much more about getting an A and graduating their degree on time. The romantic notion of learning for the sake of increasing one's understanding is no longer practiced. That's really where, okay, so that's what he means as opposed to real learning. This is mainly due to the mass production methods now being applied to higher education. The students are more concerned about getting an A and graduating with their degree. You'll have, at universities and colleges, they talk about the issue of grade inflation. Have any of you heard about that? You know what I'm talking about when I say grade inflation? Grade inflation is where what previously would have earned a C is now earning a B or better. Let's just give them passing grades. Something that would previously have failed somebody, we're giving them a passing grade now. That students want to get A's and B's, and nobody wants a C. Luckily, I'm old enough that, I'm old school. I told you folks, if you write something good, you're going to get a C. That's a good grade, folks. That's a C. And if you write something exceptional, you can earn an A. But it has to be exceptional, folks. Not just better than the guy sitting next to you. No, what the guy sitting next to you is a poor writer. Well, I'm better than he is. Okay, good. Does that make necessarily mean you're going to get an A? No. But we get that idea. I don't deal with grade inflation, sorry. But in A, notice he doesn't say getting a passing grade. He says that students are worried about getting an A. What do I have to do to get an A? I don't get an A. Well, be exceptional. You get an A. If you're just better than most of your cohorts and better than the average college students, then you're going to get a B. And if you're average, if you're a good student, then you're going to get a C. If you're less than average, you're not getting a C. That's, I gave you those standards in your syllabus that explain to you, here's the standards, what I expect to see. Well, this particular student, his last name is Wynn, makes this comment. He goes on and talks about issues about majors. Chemistry majors do not take art or music classes for fun. Philosophy majors don't try physics and mathematics courses for the sole purpose of gaining knowledge. This is a sad statement, but a reality that's come about due to rising cost of education. He relates it to cost of how much tuition is. So that's why people who are philosophy majors aren't going to be taking those physics classes. And likewise, why chemistry majors are not going to take music or art classes. Cost too much money, why do I need to take it? It's not going to help me with my degree, I'm not going to take it. As opposed to what Murray says, that people who majored in honors in English literature, could they have taken and passed a different major, such as physics? Well, possibly they could have, but they're not going to take physics classes if they don't need to. Why do you have to take it? At the University of Texas, to get a core number of hours that you can take for basic, they had basic fields when I went to school, almost 40 years ago. They had it divided into certain areas. You have the language arts
Your
area.
conference is scheduled to end in 2 minutes.
The language arts area was, you had to get, as an English major, you had to have certain basic classes in English and then so many hours of a foreign language. Well, I had a friend who was a science major. She was pre-med. She didn't have to take foreign language. Not part of her degree. She did take the CLEP exam, earning college credit, in Spanish. She was a native speaker. She CLEP'd out of 17 hours of Spanish, which she happened to use for electives. So it saved her a whole semester of taking electives someplace that she was going to need because all of her Spanish hours counted. But she didn't have to have Spanish because that's not part of her degree. And sometimes all we look at are the degree. Why do I really have to take for my degree? I was required to have 15 hours of natural sciences and or mathematics. Well, I wanted to do much more than that because I decided to pursue physics for, not necessarily a minor, but picked it up. I decided to go ahead and pick up a high school, the teaching certificate that will allow you to teach in the public school system. My sister told me I should, so it's easier just to agree with your older sister. Okay, I'll go do that. So you have to have a second teaching field, so I chose physics. Because I liked it. And so I wanted 18 hours in physics and 6 hours of chemistry and all sorts of things. I had a math class. Well, I didn't need a math class eventually. I could have gotten by while taking a math class in college. It wasn't much of a math class. But do we pursue those classes because we want to? Well, not always. So next time we're going to talk more about that. We'll look a little bit more and we'll wrap up the education issue.